here are these answers. 4 and 5 inside the lines. One's on the right, one's on the left, so those are alternate interior angles, which are congruent. 4 and 6, those are same side interior or consecutive interior. They're going to be supplementary. 2 and 7, alternate exterior. 1 and 5 are corresponding, top left with the top left. 5 and 8 are vertical angles. And 3 and 4, I know that was cut off a little bit. 3 and 4, these two angles make a straight line. So they're a linear pair. And they're going to be supplementary. And so a big part of what we're doing is being able to pick out which type of angles are which. So something that might be able to help you, if you were having trouble with the way I've been describing it, another way that you can think about it is that if we trace out these angles, some of them make specific shapes. So like my alternate interior angles, if I trace out those angles, here's angle 4, right here, and then angle 5 is down here, so it would trace out over here. So when I trace out those alternate interior angles, it makes this kind of zigzag Z shape. And so that's something you can use to pick out when we have those alternate interior angles, is to kind of trace it out and say, oh, that's got like a Z or a zigzag. So we have alternate interior angles. Here are those shapes. Corresponding angles tend to make an F shape, being in the same place, bottom right with bottom right, when I trace it out. Alternate interior, like I said, tends to make kind of a Z shape. Consecutive interior, or same side interior, tends to make a C or a backward C, depending on how it's drawn. Right? It depends on which angles we're looking at and how the diagram is written out. But these general C shapes, F shapes, and like Z or N, zigzag, are things that you can use to pick out those kinds of angles. If you were having trouble with it yesterday and earlier today, then that can help you. I also promised that I'd show answers to a problem that I asked you to try yesterday. So I'm going to do that as well. That was the one in the middle of the front page. This one. There are your angle measures. And there's a lot of different ways that you can go about finding each individual angle. For example, a way that I would do it is, this is 55. This and angle 3 are vertical angles across from each other, so they're going to be congruent, so that's also 55. Then we can also pick apart that these two angles, the 55 and the angle 1, these are a linear pair. So linear pair is going to be supplementary, so that's 125. This and angle 4 are also a linear pair. And then we can start to transfer down here. For example, the 55 degrees and angle 7 are alternate exterior angles. Right? This one's on the right, this one's on the left of the transversal, outside the parallel lines, alternate exterior. And so they're going to be congruent. So this one's 55, this one's also 55. And then building those angles, we can get some of the other angles. So we can say like 3 and 5 are consecutive interior. So they need to be supplementary. So we found 3 was 55. So that means with consecutive interior, 5 needs to be supplementary to it, 125. and so on from there. There's a whole bunch of different ways to get these angles using the different types of angles that we have. Depends on which angles you start with and where you go from there. But those are your answers. All right. Over to the back, we're going to finish up our notes today. Remember, when I say justify your answers, we're asking what kind of angles do we have? That's the first thing you want to write down on every problem. What kind of angles do we have? Well, here are our angles. No parallel lines here. So we're back to a Chapter 1 question. I may have even asked this exact question in Chapter 1. These angles are across from each other. These are going to be vertical angles. And vertical angles are going to be congruent. Well, if they're congruent, then they should be the same, so we're going to make them equal. And so to solve, we're going to divide. We get 10. So pick out what kind of angles you have. Use that to make your equation, to build your equation. If you know they're supposed to be the same, then make them the same. Next one. This one I'm actually going to ask you to do on your own. So remember, if it helps you to trace out those angles, if I'm looking for what kind of angles, I have this 65 degrees here, and I have y here. There are those angles. We want to start by writing out what kind of angles do we have. What kind of angles are those? And then write out, this is what that means y has to be. So each time you set up an equation or get a measurement, you should be pairing it up with, here's what kind of angles they are. Here's the type of angles that let me say that. I'll give you a minute or two to work with this problem and get your answer. The key part is getting used to visually telling what kind of angles we have. That's why we took a bunch of time on Monday to practice doing that when I started class today with that. If you need help with it, let me know after we're done with the notes here. We'll have some time to work and ask questions. By next, given that these lines are parallel, justify your answers. So in this one, here are the parallel lines. We're inside those parallel lines. They're both inside the parallel lines, and so we need to look at what side of the transversal they're on. Here's our transversal cutting through, and it looks like they're both to the right of that transversal. Both to the right. And so they are same side, interior. same side interior angles. If you liked the tracing out that I was showing, here's my angles outlined. There's the first angle, and then here's the second angle. And we get this C shape that I was showing earlier. And those angles are supplementary. And so that should feed you your equation, because supplementary means they add to what? 180. So if you know supplementary means they add to 180, then let's add the angles together and get 180. There's your equation. What are my angles that I'm adding? Well, the first one's x, and then the second one is x plus 20. Boom, equation. So this is the key part of the setup. Picking out your kind of angles, using that to make your equation. X and x is 2x. So let's finish up solving this here. Subtract. Half of 16 is 8, and so half of 160 is going to be 80. And as always, if you want to plug in, you can double check your answer. And you can say x was 80. Well, that means this is 80. And then that means this is 80 and 20 is 100. Oh, wait, these aren't the same. Well, that's because they weren't supposed to be the same. That's not what we said. We didn't say they were congruent. We said they were supplementary. And good news, 100 and 80, that sounds like they're going to add to 180. Questions on that one? Pick out your angle. Use it to build your equation. And that's what we're going to do on this last one as well, except we're going to do it 3 times. The good news is that the equations are pretty easy. So I'm going to try and give you a head start to think about how this problem might work. And take it one angle at a time. Take the angle that you know, the 72, and try and look at one of the variables. So maybe start with x. So take the x and the 72 and say, okay, what kind of angles are those? I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to think about it before I give away an answer here. There's my C shape. So we have same side interior angles. And those are going to be supplementary. So again, there's my equation. We're going to add them to 180. Which leaves, if one of the angles is 72, that's going to leave the other angle to be 108. So now we know that this angle is 108. So once again, let's try and use those measurements to figure out what y is going to be. There's actually two different ways you can do this. Two different angles that you could build from to figure out what y is. So now that you've seen one of them, maybe that'll help you, so I'll give you another 30 seconds. If I use my 108 and compare it to the 3y, that's an F shape. An F shape is going to be corresponding. And we know the corresponding angles have to be congruent. So they need to be equal to each other. Divide, solve. Now to find z. So we need to use this line. Here's some parallel lines. Here comes my transversal slicing through them. And it's a bit harder to see the F shape, but it is there. Boom, boom, boom. You kind of turn it sideways a little bit. But these are corresponding as well. So they're going to be congruent. If I look at my parallel lines, this group of angles, it's on the bottom right. This group of angles, it's on the bottom right. That's what makes them corresponding. They're matching places on those lines. So that means they have to be the same. So once again, we picked out what kind of angles we had, used that to build our equation. Since we knew they were congruent, we're going to make them equal. Let's solve. Subtract. That's 90. And so if we divide by 3, a third of 90 is going to be 30. Questions on that? All right. With that, your notes should be done and ready to go. So you should be able to log on the Canvas right now and get them turned in. So that's off your plate. Here is your homework assignment. And the first few problems are going to be the same thing that we've been doing. Name what kind of angles we have. Use that to build your equation. Starting with number 7, after you solve for x, you're going to need to plug it back in to get your angle measures. So when it says find the measure of the angle, you're going to need to make sure to get that after you solve for x. Plug it back in, get your angle measures. Then on the back, giving you a refresher of the last thing we did before break, getting those parallel and perpendicular lines. Parallel lines have the same slope, perpendicular, opposite reciprocals. We did that the week before break. I just want to remind you that that still exists.